Hello comrades, this is General Luigi, and welcome to Let's Prepare to Play Fire Emblem Awakening. I'm glad to have seen more votes this time around. I guess a little shameless self-promotion goes a long way, eh? I'll be honest here, if I had continued to see only one person vote in each election, I would have just abandoned the election process altogether. After all, it would have meant that either way, pairings were being decided by one person. Now, as always, before I start, I want to remind you that I am classifying pairings according to my personal views on what works, what doesn't, what's believable, and what isn't. You are free to disagree with me, and I wouldn't be surprised if you did. But, as I point out in the prologue, I will not stand for flaming. But let's get to the real reason you're watching this video. We'll begin with Lissa's potential pairings. Frederick's conversations with Lissa reveal a rather clear contrast between the two of them. Frederick is serious and hardworking, while Lissa is relaxed and carefree. It starts off with Frederick agreeing to train Lissa, but ultimately leads to Lissa teaching Frederick how to take time for himself. Yeah, basically it's cheerful girl gets uptight guy to relax. Personally, I never thought much of the opposites attract concept, but this series of support conversations manages to handle it pretty nicely. The only thing keeping me from making this a Class 3 pairing is that even though Lissa expresses a desire to toughen up, the focus ultimately winds up being on Frederick being strong-armed into loosening up. As such, I'm making this a Class 2 pairing. Lissa's supports with the Vake mostly revolve around Chrom. At first, the Vake just talks about his rivalry with Chrom, but it doesn't take too much to show that he actually has a great deal of respect for him. Lissa, too, has nothing but praise for her brother. They end up bonding over stories about Chrom, and by the end of the A-level conversation, they've changed the topic to how much they admire each other. They might not get along at first, but it turns out they have more in common than how much they admire Chrom. One thing I like about this group of supports is that it shows the Vake is more than just a big-headed braggart, and Lissa's own cheerful, childish personality complements that. They just seem to fit together perfectly, and because of that, I consider this pairing to be Class 3. Lissa's supports with Stahl reveal to us that Stahl's brother is an apothecary, and that said brother has asked Stahl to find an ingredient for one of his concoctions. Lissa is annoyed that Stahl's brother would make him do something like that when they were at war, and agrees to help him find the ingredient. As it turns out, Chrom had recently asked Lissa to get some perfume for someone, not telling her who. Stahl, nice guy that he is, doesn't hold the errand against his brother and is willing to give Chrom the benefit of the doubt too. Ultimately, the perfume is a gift for Lissa, and the concoction ingredient is for a medicine that gets sent to Stahl to help with his stomach aches. As with Frederick, this pairing just barely fails to be a Class 3 pairing. My reason for this is that the conversations ultimately revolve a lot around Stahl and Lissa's respective brothers instead of the people we actually see. And while there's some bonding near the end, Stahl's marriage proposal strikes me as a bit sudden. As such, I'm making this a Class 2 pairing. I've looked over a number of supports, and it seems there are quite a few dangerous cooks in the Shepherds. Lissa turns out to be one of them if her supports with Kellum are any indication. Kellum offers his services as a taste tester when Chrom refuses to eat a pie Lissa prepared. It turns out the pie tastes horrid. The next pie Lissa gives him knocks him out. She manages to improve, though, and eventually makes a pie that Kellum absolutely loves. He uses the opportunity to propose to Lissa. She accepts, of course, and then reveals that she's bad at quite a few domestic pursuits and expects Kellum to take care of all of them. It's played for laughs, but dropping all of that on Kellum is just as bad as Kellum expecting Lissa to do all of it. It might seem hypocritical of me to make this a Class 0 pairing, considering whom I married off to Chrom, but consider this. With Chrom and Sumiya, they actually bond and discuss more than just pies in the B and A level conversations. In addition, Sumiya is outright trying to win Chrom over through her actions. Lissa's just trying to improve as a cook, and comes off as only interested in that. So, again, Class 0 for this pairing. Lon'qu gets tasked with protecting Lissa and his supports with her. Apparently, some group is plotting to assassinate her. Lissa, unsurprisingly, tries to get Lon'qu to open up a bit more and get over his difficulties with women during this time. Lon'qu, also unsurprisingly, keeps his distance. Eventually, the assassins strike, and Lon'qu fends them off, killing every last one of them. Though his job is ended, he ends up taking a bit of a liking to Lissa by that point. Unsurprisingly, he falls in love with her. I know Lon'qu's aversion to women makes him a bit of an odd case, but I feel as though his transition is too quick, making his eventual marriage proposal come off as hasty. I just don't buy this relationship. Still, a quick transition is better than none at all, so I'm making this a Class 1 pairing. Lissa's supports with Rickon give us a nice look at both of them and their feelings of inadequacy. As the support progresses, though, we see how this inadequacy isn't simply a desire to prove oneself. Rickon and Lissa both want to protect their comrades and do more to help the cause. The topic briefly switches to Crom and how much Rickon admires him and wants to be of some use to him, leading to a nice awe moment when Lissa says Rickon's brave and on the way to becoming someone's hero himself. The supports show how much the two of them have in common, as well as how much they care about each other. By the end, it's no surprise that they've fallen in love. They have a great deal in common, and their supports handle that admirably. This pairing is easily a Class 3 pairing. Lissa's supports with Gregor pretty much deal exclusively with Gregor helping her overcome her fears. There's a cute I believe in you moment in the A-level conversation, but I don't get much of a friendship vibe from them. The conversations also have ample humor value, but I try not to judge pairings based on such a thing. Anyway, as is the standard with romantic supports, Gregor proposes to Lissa in the S-level conversation. However, it reads like more of a proposal that he continue helping her overcome her fears than a proposal that he marry her. This is an easy Class 0. The love might be there, but it doesn't come across at all. Lissa and Libra complement each other in an interesting way. Each possesses traits the other admires. In addition, their personalities contrast each other very much. Lissa is cheerful and energetic, while Libra is calm and withdrawn. Despite this, bond between the two of them forms rather easily thanks to their mutual admiration. Because of this, their falling in love comes off as very natural and believable, despite my typically being averse to the whole opposites attract approach to romance. Unlike the more common application of opposites attract, with Lissa and Libra we don't see their differences lead to them fighting. Rather, they admire each other's strong points, and as it turns out, they actually have quite a bit in common too. Class 3. One thing I like about Lissa's supports with Henry is that they bring out the irony of Henry being a very nice guy with absolutely no moral compass. Lissa has trouble sleeping because she can't stop thinking about all the people who have died and how there will be more death before the war's over. Henry offers to use a curse to help her fall asleep. The curse works well, but unbeknownst to Lissa, each casting requires a sacrifice. Henry usually sacrifices a bird. Once Lissa finds out that her sleeping well is powered by cute creature deaths, she tells Henry to stop with the nightly curses. He stops, and once again Lissa has trouble sleeping, which leads to her almost passing out and getting caught by Henry. She falls asleep in his arms. Yeah, it's pretty cute. In the S-level conversation, he serves as Lissa's pillow yet again, and uses the opportunity to propose to her. It's a very cute scene, despite Henry having a couple of screws loose. The support does a great job of showing their characters, but I get the impression the marriage would be threatened by the conflict between Henry's amoral outlook on life and Lissa's love of all living things. So, as cute a couple as they are, I'm making this a Class 2 pairing. In her supports with Donald, Lissa decides to try to take full advantage of her being older than him by treating him as a younger brother. Unsurprisingly, Donald outperforms her at just about everything she tries to teach him. The experience turns out to be rather humbling for Lissa, but it also allows the two of them to bond and grow close. Eventually, Donald decides to actually become part of Lissa's family and proposes to her. What I like about their S-level conversation is that we see Lissa regain her ambition while retaining her humility. The pairing starts out a bit rough, but it ends up becoming one of the better and more believable ones in my opinion. Class 3. So, who will marry Lissa? Well, if you plan on watching my Let's Play of this game, it's partially up to you, assuming you vote. If you want Lissa to marry someone in particular, please vote for that character by posting your vote in the comments section or sending me a private message. If you feel any of the Class 0 pairings deserve a chance, you have until 12 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time this Wednesday, November 27th, to convince me to reclassify them. But now, on to the second group. This week's groom-to-be is Brady. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Of course, as it turns out, I was exposed to Persona 4 well after I completed Fire Emblem Awakening, so when I first got to know Kanji, my thoughts were, This fellow reminds me a great deal of Brady, instead of the other way around. Anyway. Brady's supports with Kjell call attention to two things. The first is how horribly ashamed Brady is of his own frailty. The second is how harsh of a personal trainer Kjell is. The bottom line is that Brady wants to make himself stronger, so he begs Kjell to train him. It takes until B level, but she eventually gives in and agrees to train him. She runs him absolutely ragged in the A-level conversation. In all seriousness, I suspect most people would die from exhaustion if they undertook Kjell's training regimen. Come S level, Brady reveals that he's been in love with Kjell for a while, and that's what motivated him to continue the training no matter how torturous it was. Brady felt as though he wasn't worthy of being Kjell's husband at the time, to which Kjell agrees. She says she'll keep training Brady and make him into her perfect man. Far be it from me to say we should never change for the people we love, but Brady's determination to make himself worthy of Kjell's love comes off as more of an obsession than actual love, and Kjell's response gives me the impression she'll constantly hold Brady to an unrealistic standard. I can't see that kind of relationship working out in the long run. At all. Class 0. So what about Severa? Well, with how much the two snark at everything and everyone, they fit together pretty nicely. This leads to Severa getting the brilliant idea of starting a special society, dubbed Severa and Brady's S&B Society for Sarcastic People. The S&B stands for Snark and Bark, and is also a play on their initials. Anyway, given how Severa is with other people's money, Brady winds up spending a ridiculous amount of money on materials for the society's extremely gaudy tent and its equally gaudy furnishings. And, of course, as one of the members of this contrarian society, he snarks about all the way, while Severa snarks about Brady's apparent lack of enthusiasm for her expensive project. Brady keeps at it for Severa's sake, though, as he reveals as an aside at the end of an A-level conversation. Come S-level, a huge storm has blown away the S&B Society's tent, and Severa is in tears. It's at this point that Severa reveals the whole thing was just a way of spending more time with Brady, whom, surprise surprise, she loves. As it turns out, the reason Brady gave it A-level for putting up with Severa's ridiculous demands can easily be reinterpreted as stemming from love. This is a case of a retroactive declaration of love done right. The feelings are clearly mutual, and it acts as an alternate explanation for the events of earlier conversations, rather than just an excuse. Class 3. Brady's supports with Morgan start off in a way that strikes me as really strange. I haven't mentioned it since it wasn't relevant at the time, but Morgan has amnesia and remembers almost none of her life before joining us. Brady finds that a little too convenient and suggests that Morgan's an enemy spy. Morgan is, of course, bothered by this, especially when an injured Brady refuses help from her because he suspects she'll just kill him. Then comes the A-level conversation in which Morgan comes up to Brady and offers him some interesting remedies. Lifeblood drained from a fell viper, and a bunch of bear gizzards. I'm not making this up. Morgan also talks about these things as though she's selling them in a television commercial, and before Brady can stop her, she pours them down his throat. Somehow, they almost immediately lead to him feeling incredible and apologizing for not trusting her. I've had dreams that made more sense than that scene. I know this is Morgan we're talking about, but wow. Let's move on to the S-level conversation, shall we? Brady apologizes to Morgan yet again for how he didn't trust her earlier, and goes on to praise her kindness before just outright telling her that he's fallen in love with her. Morgan bursts into tears, happier than a Yoshi, and admits she's felt the same way for a long time. Yeah, it's a retroactive declaration of love again. Brady does a decent job of showing why he's grown to love Morgan, but we don't see any signs of why Morgan feels the same way. She outright says that she kept putting up a fake smile even when Brady was being mean to her in the C and B level conversations. It worked out in the end, yes, but I'm still left feeling Morgan's feelings for Brady were tacked on as an excuse. Class 1. Oh, and I promise to show you that A-level conversation even if this pairing loses. It's too weird not to share. But let's move on to someone who doesn't have so many screws loose. Well, that doesn't mean she has none. As with Severa, Brady has a lot in common with Noir. Here we actually get a nice look at Brady's soft side. You know, the side that's kind of desirable in a priest. Brady and Noir are both rather frail and prone to illness and injury. Their conversations all take place in the medical tent, usually with Brady in there because of an injury and Noir in there because of her anemia. As it turns out, both of them have been prone to illness and injury since childhood, and the medical tent has sort of become their place. By S level, it's pretty clear Noir has fallen in love with Brady, and it's at that point that Brady admits to feeling the same way. Essentially, their frailty brought them together. One thing that I feel makes this one of Noir's better pairings is that it's one of the two supports in which her inner demon never surfaces. I'll grant that that side of her is still a part of her, but I feel as though it's not the part of her that really has a place in any sort of romantic relationship. I feel as though both Noir and Brady fit together really well, and while both of them have undesirable sides, those sides tend to be triggered by what others do. And the fact that those sides aren't triggered in their conversations says a lot about how well suited they are to each other. Class 3. Finally, we have Na. Brady's supports with her do a nice job of showing both aspects of his personality. Despite his brutish exterior, he's actually a very kind-hearted person. At first, Na is intimidated by his thuggish face and crude way of talking. However, after Brady saves her from drowning between conversations, she takes it upon herself to spread the word that he's actually a really nice guy. Brady is not exactly happy about having someone going around constantly singing his praises. And then Na decides to start treating Brady as an older brother, following him around like a duckling following its mother. Na eventually acknowledges that she's fallen in love with Brady and essentially decides she's his wife. Yes, you heard that right. She pretty much gives Brady no input on the matter and leaves him so confused that he just ends up running with it. Na pretty much comes off as a doting and annoying younger sibling in these conversations, rather than anything resembling a friend, let alone a lover. As for Brady, I didn't see any signs that he even likes Na. Never mind love her. Class 0. So those are your options for Brady. As with Lissa, if you plan on watching my Let's Play of this game, please vote for whichever pairing you support by posting your vote in the comments section or sending me a private message. If you feel any of the Class 0 pairings deserve a chance, you have until 12 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time this Wednesday, November 27th, to convince me to reclassify them. The polls will close at 12 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time this Saturday, November 30th. Also, I recently decided to cover romantic support conversations that never got a chance due to one party being promised to someone else. The actual elections will hold priority, of course, but I'm hoping to have some bonus videos up with those averted conversations sometime before the new year. But I'm getting ahead of myself. As always, I look forward to hearing from you. I will see you next time.